you've been following any football team over the past couple of years, chances are you've noticed a nonchalant player come through the ranks, and it's likely a young attacker with quick feet and exciting skills. But the tricks and goals aren't what seems to stand out about them. No, this seems to be lost behind their calm, almost robotic nature, and their inability to show any emotion. Players like Michael Olise, Madueke, and Lamine Yamal are typically the star-studded, nonchalant players that come to mind. But it seems like the number of these aura-obsessed young talents is only increasing as time goes on. So what is this newfound obsession with playing it cool both on and off the pitch? And what implications does this have on the new generation of footballers and the game as a whole? First, we need to look into what nonchalance really is. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, nonchalance is having an air of easy unconcern or indifference. Nonchalance is not trying too hard or feeling too much of anything, regardless of the situation. Although this concept has grown exponentially in the past couple of years, mostly because of TikTok, this idea of athletes seeming to be unbothered has actually been around for decades. If you've ever watched old clips of the World Cup or Pele, players seem to act extra, jolly when their team scores a goal. I mean, could you imagine how the internet would react if a popular player celebrated like this now? But starting as early as the 80s and 90s, some of the most prolific athletes had a new air about them. As rap and pop culture became much more integrated into sports culture, players pulled a lot of influence from rappers and pop stars, from the way that they dressed, acted, and even spoke. The first real crossovers between hip-hop, rap, and sports were found in basketball, as this was seen as a creative and expressive outlet for many inner-city kids, just as music and culture were. It's no surprise that the NBA draft started to look like a fashion show. The youth were increasingly looking to these stars as idols and role models, and would try to emulate the way that they dressed and played. As athletes transitioned into the pop culture spotlight, they put more effort into curating their appearance off the court or field. Players would dress like fashion models and rock stars, and the media would eat it up. They would be featured in magazines, posters, and broadcast on national television. This rise in popularity meant that athletes were now seen as the frontrunners of fashion and culture, and had an entirely new persona outside of their respective sports. They were the cool kids everyone was looking up to. And this sort of swagger athletes had about them was beginning to trickle into their sports and how they played, becoming inseparable from the athletes themselves. Whether it was making a game-winning shot or scoring a ridiculously cheeky goal, this new form of expression, or I guess lack of expression, was the new meta for seeming like a superstar. It's impossible to have a conversation about the rise of nonchalance and not mention Kobe Bryant, aka the Black Mamba. The all-star athlete and international superstar was the first person to truly embody the term ice in the veins, staying expressionless and emotionless in even the most incredible moments of his career. And with the rise of social media, the concept of nonchalance would absolutely explode. As apps like Instagram and TikTok started taking over the internet, people started to really build two separate identities, the ones they had in real life, and the fine-tuned version of themselves they could edit and post for the world to see. Having complete control over how you could be perceived meant that young children were becoming increasingly obsessed with seeming cool online. This also led to a much smaller range of what is considered to be acceptable social behavior, especially with the whole cringe epidemic that came about in the mid to late 2010s. People were constantly being judged for overexpressing themselves or not following the status quo when posting on social media. As these haters were able to hide behind a screen, they were much more cruel and blunt in criticizing people they had never even met. The fear of being seen as cringeworthy was now not just exclusive to social media, but also seeped into the way that kids were acting in real life. And this is where nonchalance came into play. Teens will project nonchalance to navigate social dynamics with a shield against vulnerability, protecting themselves from criticism, while fitting into a broader cultural aesthetic that values minimal effort and maximum confidence. And it's easy to see how this potentially problematic trend has found its way into football. In a world where players are constantly being memed and criticized online in front of the whole world, the fear of failure and judgment is at the forefront of many young footballers' minds. Players like Richarlison and Antony have opened up about this in interviews, and they stated just how big of an effect social media can have on a player's confidence and mental health. Players like Darwin Nunez have even deleted posts on Instagram because of how much hate he received online. To combat the cesspool of hate that social media tends to be, some players have resorted to nonchalance as this sort of shield from negative attention. By seeming emotionless and uncaring, players are more likely to be seen as cool and are looked up to by the younger generation. They're labeled as having aura, being tough, and their highlights and cool celebrations are turned into viral edits. And who can blame them? Everyone wants to be accepted and looked up to a certain degree. and this pressure athletes feel when playing in these high-stakes games on an international stage must be terrifying for these young players. But at what point does this projection of indifference and coldness become problematic for these footballers? To dive into this potential issue, one has to look into the career of a player like Jadon Sancho. Former Bundesliga superstar is definitely one of the most polarizing figures in football. Some say that he's an overpaid brat with an attitude problem, while others say that he's just been misused and misunderstood. But regardless of your opinion on him as a person, it's impossible to argue against the fact that his performances have dropped off in the past couple of years. At Borussia Dortmund, Jadon Sancho was regarded as a wonder kid, racking up over 30 goal contributions in multiple seasons in Germany and winning multiple trophies as well. But the second he transferred to Manchester United, it seemed like his ability and confidence just fell off a cliff. He only managed to score 3 goals in his debut season for the Red Devils, despite making 29 appearances. This isn't uncommon for young players to underperform after making a massive money move early in their careers. Even legends like Luka Modric and Ousmane Dembele were regarded as flops when they made big money moves to super clubs. By the way, make sure to check out my video on Dembele's comeback here. But even after these first seasons in the spotlight, a player can make a decision at this sort of fork in their career. Do I want to fade away, or do I want to give it absolutely everything I have to fulfill my potential? Jadon Sancho, as you probably can guess, did not decide to lock in after this horrendous first showing in the Premier League. He struggled with injuries, match fitness, and most importantly, his attitude. He seemed to almost try to disconnect himself from the club entirely. From a flashy winger with ultimate composure to a substitute with an attitude problem, Jadon fell into the trap that many young attackers seem to do these days. Look at a player like Marcus Rashford. It seems like this calmness and composure at a young age can slip into total indifference if left unchecked. And as this nonchalant subculture increases in popularity, it's becoming more difficult to tell the difference between being cold and genuinely not caring about football. Take this young Real Madrid squad, for example. Cocky, unbelievable skill, and seemingly unlimited money at their fingertips. But even with a world-class roster, they drastically underperformed this season, both in La Liga and the Champions League. And the worst part about this, they had the least distance covered out of all of the teams in the quarterfinals. In fact, they only outran one team in all of their Champions League games in the 24-25 season in a 3-2 win against Atalanta. Now, is this only because of young players wanting to look nonchalant while they play in hopes of making a TikTok edit? Obviously not. But it does say something about the lack of effort some of these young superstars put into big games. Look at Michael Olise, for example. He had an incredible first season at Bayern Munich after his shock move from Crystal Palace. But look at the way he carries himself. I mean, he seems to care so little when he scores, you start to wonder if it genuinely makes a difference to him whether he scores a hat-trick or gets subbed off. Whether it's on the pitch, in an interview, or a post on social media, the sentiment is all the same. And this isn't meant to take away from how talented of a player he is, but it does say something about how passion has visibly dropped in this new generation of footballers. I mean, when was the last time you've seen a player celebrate like Troy Deeney or Sergio Aguero? So will this trend continue to take over sports? And will we have a generation of zombie-like professional athletes strutting around the pitch, aura farming? Or is this, like most things, a passing social media trend that will be gone before we know it? Most likely a little bit of both. Mannerisms naturally change over generations, and it's pretty much impossible to predict where athletes will be at in a decade from now. But I think that it's pretty safe to say that so long as TikTok and other platforms play such a big role in our lives, people will continue to be guarded and play it cool to a certain extent. And as social norms and trends shift faster and faster online, it's also likely that being nonchalant will eventually become cringeworthy and antiquated as well. You can already see some movements against this trend, particularly from the older generations. People are labeled as unprofessional or lazy compared to previous generations of athletes. But this criticism of seemingly careless athletes can also be seen as problematic. As with most things, there tends to be a racial divide in a lot of the criticism you're seeing in football, and players just aren't given equal treatment for similar behaviors. Take a young black athlete like Lamine Yamal, for example. At just 17 years old, he's had one of the most incredible breakout seasons in football history, winning a domestic treble and contending for the Ballon d'Or. Recently, he's also fallen victim to the nonchalant trend setting, from sagging his pants to frequently posting his own highlights on TikTok to, well, whatever this is. And as a young, successful black athlete, it's clear that he is put under a microscope to a much greater extent than other white footballers who share many of the same characteristics as him. After a match against the Netherlands, former Dutch player Rafael van der Vaart commented that Yamal's low-slung shorts and what he perceived as a lack of effort were starting to bother him. Van der Vaart suggested that at Yamal's young age, he should be more focused on proving himself in every game. And what did Yamal do in response? Well, he scored the next game and celebrated with his shorts practically at his ankles. Another incident involving Yamal receiving controversial criticism came after a press conference for the Spanish national team, where he was seen wearing his Spain hat backwards. Ex-Real Madrid player Guti criticized Yamal for wearing his cap like this. He called the look unprofessional, and his comments stirred controversy, with many accusing him of unfairly targeting the 17-year-old. It appears that Yamal, while being objectively one of the best players in the world, and seemingly harmless and uncontroversial, receives backlash for how he behaves off the pitch when he's doing nothing wrong to harm or bother others. On the other hand, take a player like Cole Palmer. The recent Premier League Young Player of the Season is the epitome of a nonchalant baller. He burst onto the scene after a surprise departure from Man City to Chelsea, where he racked up an unexpected 22 goals and 11 assists in his first season for them. During this explosion onto the world stage, he started doing his Cole Palmer celebration. As he began to gain more and more attention, so did his signature celebration. It totally took over the internet and sports all around the world during the 23-24 season, with athletes like Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets and Timo Meyer of the New Jersey Devils replicating the Brits' trademark move. It already seems like the way in which people view Palmer and Yamal's confidence and nonchalance couldn't be more different. Yamal's cockiness and unbothered attitude has been ridiculed by many notable figures, while Palmer's has been celebrated. Even further, Cole Palmer seems to come off as debatably rude and short in interviews, but people seem to find him funny and harmless. But when Yamal just dresses a certain way, he receives backlash for it. After winning the Conference League final against Antony and Real Betis, what a game by the way, Cole Palmer was seen with the Player of the Match trophy literally shoved down his pants on live television. Can you even imagine how the internet would have reacted if Yamal did this, if he was getting shit for having his pants a little lower than other players? So while the rise of nonchalance and a possible drop in passion can definitely be seen as detrimental to the entertainment of the game, some of the criticisms around these new age ballers are also bad for the game. How I see it, you should let these players act how they see fit, so long as they aren't harming themselves or their team. If a player wants to tear apart an entire league as a minor and then wear his hat backwards, let him do just that. If a player doesn't jump into the stands with his shirt off, it doesn't mean he doesn't love the game or his club. While there may be some cases in which players care more about their appearance and reputation than their performances, there's likely a very small selection of them. Most of the time, these young and successful players are put into boxes and labeled as problematic just because they're, well, young and successful. The reality is, we're going to continue to see more and more of these young stars acting cool and collected while still putting out 5-star performances, and they don't have to be your favorite player. If you want a passionate player who wears his heart on his sleeve, you could support, I don't know, Enzo Fernandez? Jordan Pickford? Anyways, if you enjoyed this commentary video, please leave a like and subscribe, as it does a lot for this channel. And if you made it this far, make sure to leave a comment about what you think of this new age of nonchalant ballers.